It was one of the coldest nights in New York. As the crowded streets buzzed with people rushing to their destinations, no one paid attention to the man hunched over on the sidewalk. His tattered coat did little to protect him from the freezing wind. He shoved his trembling hands into his pockets, trying to keep them warm. Hunger gnawed at his stomach. He hadn't eaten in days. A passerby wrinkled their nose in disgust before muttering, "These city parasites are everywhere. Get a job, why don't you?" The man slowly lifted his head. His face was hidden beneath an unkempt beard, his eyes hollow and exhausted, but behind them, buried beneath years of hardship, was once a brilliant mind. His name was John Anderson, and once he had been one of NASA's brightest engineers, but now no one remembered him. 50 years ago, John was a young engineer working at NASA, designing propulsion systems and spacecraft. He had witnessed history unfold, not from a TV screen, but from the front lines of space exploration. Back then, the world belonged to him, but when the Vietnam War broke out, he made a choice that would change his life forever. He left his laboratory behind, choosing instead to serve his country on the battlefield, and from that moment on, nothing was ever the same. The air in Vietnam was thick, heavy with the stench of gunpowder and death. The battlefield was the definition of chaos. John had originally been assigned to develop electronics for military operations, but eventually he was sent to the front lines. That was when he learned the harsh truth. War was not just strategy and theory. War was hell, explosions, deafening screams. His friends torn apart right before his eyes. The images burned themselves into his mind, never to leave. Something inside him broke that day. When the war finally ended, John returned home. But he was no longer the same man. His hands trembled. His nights were plagued by nightmares. His temper flared without warning. His mind was trapped in a war that had long since ended. He tried to go back to his old life, to return to NASA, but he couldn't keep up. His focus was shattered. His superiors saw it too. He was no longer the brilliant young engineer they once knew. He took on smaller projects, but one by one, he lost them. Because he couldn't sleep, because he couldn't concentrate. Eventually, he lost everything. His job, his savings, his home. Years passed. Now, no one knew he had once been a NASA engineer. The sharp winds of New York cut against John's face like a blade. His torn, weathered coat did little to shield him from the cold, but he was used to it. People rushed past, lost in their own worlds, not sparing him a second glance. The stories of the homeless never mattered to anyone. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tattered notebook, the one thing he had never let go of. The pages were yellowed, frayed at the edges, worn down by years of hardship, but to him, it was priceless. Because this notebook was a portal to his past. The pages were filled with complex rocket equations, aerodynamic calculations, and thrust force formulas. They were remnants of a life he had once lived, a time when he was a brilliant mind at NASA, working on the future of space travel. His fingers trembled as he flipped through the pages. He took out a pencil, blunt and barely usable, and began scribbling a new equation in the empty margins. But the world around him didn't see a forgotten genius. To them, he was just another crazy old man on the streets. A woman walking by whispered to her friend, "Poor guy, talking to himself, writing nonsense." No one knew that this man, this homeless stranger, had once designed equations that sent rockets into space. No one knew that he had once walked the halls of NASA, contributing to some of the greatest engineering feats of his time. And now he sat on the frozen pavement, hungry, cold, and holding on to the last fragments of the life he lost. Then he noticed a shadow fall over him. A man stood before him, seemingly just another passerby. But in reality, he was one of the most recognized names in the world, Elon Musk. With a cup of coffee in hand, he had been walking through the city, scouting locations for an upcoming documentary on homelessness. But as he passed by, something caught his eye, the old man's notebook. He paused. His gaze settled on the pages, scanning the handwritten notes, and suddenly, his breath caught in his throat. John's notebook wasn't filled with random scribbles. The pages contained high-level rocket science equations. Elon's heart began to race. This wasn't possible. He crouched down beside the man, eyes darting across the complex formulas, thrust calculations, angular momentum equations, orbital predictions. These weren't the notes of a madman, these were the equations of an aerospace engineer. His voice dropped, filled with disbelief. "Where did you learn these formulas?" John lifted his head slowly, his tired, sunken eyes meeting Elon's. He studied the man before him for a moment, then his lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. He recognized Elon Musk, the billionaire, the innovator, the man who was pushing space travel into the future. And then, John let out a dry chuckle. "I learned these before you were even born." Elon's eyes narrowed slightly, curiosity burning in them. Because this wasn't just another homeless man. This was a fallen genius, and Elon Musk had just realized it. At that moment, something in the universe shifted, because this encounter was about to change everything. Elon immediately recognized John's incredible intelligence, but more than that, he saw something deeper, a man who had been lost to time. This wasn't just any homeless man sitting on a street bench. This was a brilliant aerospace engineer who had once helped shape the future of NASA. And yet, here he was, clinging to an old, tattered notebook, the last remnant of the life he had lost. As John spoke, Elon listened intently. His eyes widened as he absorbed the tragedy of a man forgotten by history, his promising career at NASA, his time in the Vietnam War that shattered his mind and body, the relentless nightmares, the trauma, the lost job opportunities, the life that slowly crumbled away. Elon exhaled sharply, lowering his head for a moment. John had once designed rockets. Now people barely even noticed him as they walked by. This wasn't just one man's misfortune. It was humanity's loss, a genius left to decay on the streets. And at that moment, Elon made a decision. This couldn't be how John's story ended. He turned to him, his voice firm but calm. "I have an offer for you. Would you like to work for SpaceX?" John's face froze. His expression was a mixture of disbelief, fear, and confusion. He stared at Elon for several seconds, waiting for the punchline, but when he saw that Elon was serious, his lips trembled. I'm not that man anymore. My hands shake, my mind is scattered. I can't be who I was." Elon smiled softly, his eyes glancing down at John's old notebook. "But you're still solving equations." John looked at his own scribbled calculations. Despite everything he had lost, his hands still remembered the numbers, the formulas, the science that once defined him. Slowly, he picked up his pencil again, and with a deep breath, he carefully wrote down a new equation. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance. A few weeks later, John stepped into SpaceX headquarters, his worn-out clothes replaced with a crisp suit. Though his hands still trembled, his eyes held a newfound spark. Around him, young engineers debated rocket designs, their excitement filling the room. For the first time in decades, John felt a flicker of purpose. A young engineer approached holding a blueprint. "Mr. John, could you check these calculations?" John's hands trembled as he took the document, his breath slowing. Then, he saw it. A mistake. "The angle is off by 0.2 degrees. The rocket won't generate enough lift." The engineer's eyes widened. He quickly recalculated. John was right. From across the room, Elon Musk watched silently, a knowing smile on his face. At that moment, John felt alive again. He was no longer just a forgotten name. He was John Anderson, aerospace engineer.